Hi everyone. Hope you had lunch already and you got coffee. I promise this thing is that almost the last talk of the day. So after yesterday's Trump party, and I know there's somebody suffering a little bit today, but yeah, it's always the Spanish people though. It's crazy. Anyway, so thanks for coming. We're gonna talk today about the project we've been working for the last 5 months, the architecture blueprints, and I hope some of you know it already. If not, I hope you're here to learn about it. And I want to say thanks to Mobiconf for inviting me. It's been like very well organized and a very good experience. Uh, yeah, it's a very interesting conference and very good talk so far. So that's really good. Um, I have a missing partner today. So Jose, he's the lead developer of the project. He's a DP, developer programming engineer at Google, and he's in Tokyo today. So he couldn't come. I'm gonna do it by myself with him. And my name is David Gonzalez. I'm an GDE, and currently I'm working for a company called Help Scout. And Jose says I'm a map whisperer. I don't really know what he means by that. I do talk a lot to my phone when I'm looking at an app, but maybe that's why he says that. And I've learned in this conference that when you leave a company, you should tell the conference you're assisting that you change your title for another company, because I had my old company before there in the badges. So that was interesting. Yay! So now I'm working for Help Scouts. Help Scout is our mission at Help Scout is to help companies build businesses that customers love. And we do have a suite of tools that makes the interaction with those customers more helpful and more human. So if you don't know about it, check it out. I promise this is the only sales slide of the page, so that's enough for it. But I want to thank them today for letting me come here as well. Why about this project? I've talked about a little bit about the reasoning behind starting all this project with Google. As this is Diane Hackborn, this is the most senior engineer at the framework at Google, and it's been a lot of discussion around should Google provide guidance towards how to build an app? Should they tell us should use MVP or MVVM or RxJava? Should we use Flux? And my opinion is that it shouldn't. They're building a framework that we are all using to create a suite of apps or a product. Their focus is to create a framework that runs as smooth as possible and as performant as possible. It shouldn't be, my opinion is, it shouldn't be up to them to tell us how to create those apps, because they don't create them. They don't create apps. They do create a framework. And imagine that your activities today would inherit from observables, or imagine all your activities would come with a base presenter. What if you don't like that decision? That's a decision you make with your team, and based on your knowledge, based on your team's knowledge, based on maybe that there is a new library that you want to try out, and then you can no longer use it. So having this framework allows us to decide how we want to move forward, and that's the main reason why we have this project here. It's up to them to give us a framework, and we decide how to use it. If you haven't visited yet, that's the address of the URL of the GitHub repo. It's under the Google samples folder. Star me. There's a competition that Jose is running with the iOS Cats app. I think we're like 1,000 stars behind them, and I think he does have a race if we overcome. I don't know, but I hope he doesn't listen to it. But yes, if you haven't checked it out, go for it. I'm gonna talk about it. As of the start of the project 5 months ago, these were all the contributors. We have Stefan Lisner. Besides Jose and myself, we have Stefan Lisner from Google, Jorge, which is over there. He worked on the clean architecture. Natalie also worked on it. Saul did the Dagger example that Miroslav was showcasing before. Eric Hellman worked on the RxJava, and Florina as well on the Rx. And he's working on the MVVM. They are all very smart people, so it's very interesting to work with them and see what they're doing. And then there's a long list of contributors from the community, either by issues or submitting pull requests, submitting fixes. The main idea of this is a project that we can collaborate. It's an educational project for everybody to learn and everybody to improve on their skills on the day-to-day. And yes, maybe yourself, if you haven't contributed yet, we're gonna explain a little bit how to do that, and hopefully you'll jump on board. When we talk about the target audience of a project, it's always difficult when Google releases a sample about something, because is this what we have to do? It's similar to what the material guidelines are. Do we have to follow them? Is that a rule, and do you have to do that, or is just a guideline? And this is just a simple guideline. So the target audience, if you're starting on Android for the last maybe 2, 3, 4 months, this probably is not the project for you. This project is for, if you're a beginner, you're going to be learning about activities and content providers and broadcast receivers and all that stuff that you need to know how it works before you can make decisions how to build a proper project. If you're an expert developer, you've been working for the last 5 or 6 years making Android apps, you've already solved all these problems. You already have built apps that scale, you've already built apps that are working on different frameworks, on different platforms. You know what a minimum SDK problem might give you on your current solution. So you've solved problems already. So you're not gonna benefit much from learning from this project or contributing to it. But there's a whole spectrum in the middle of people like myself and hopefully like all of you, where you've been working for a few years on the platform and you've built apps. But now there's a lot of talk about architecture, and it's a good thing that we're talking about architecture. Like when I started 7 years ago, there was no architecture. There was the God activity pattern, like some of them describe. Everything was in one place, and that was it. So having a discussion around how to build products and how to interact with them, it's a very healthy discussion. And I don't think that there's no silver bullet. I think somebody said that in a slide yesterday. There's no silver bullet. Just because you use MVP doesn't mean that your app is going to be perfect. Or just because you use MVVM or because you use Flux. At the end of the day, as the talk from before was saying, the success of your app is going to be how many users you have, or it's going to be how many, it's going to be how many users are interacting with it. Normally you're going to be working for a company. If that company is not making money, you're going to stop making apps for that company. So the success of an application today is not just the fact that it's beautiful code and it's fast to ship and you can do fast iterations. If the product doesn't use, if your users are not using your product, it doesn't matter. You may have the best architecture in the world, but you failed. So it's always a mix between the engineering part and the product teams to make those decisions. So if you're in this spectrum in the middle, then this is a good project for you. And this is not an architecture project. Architecture comes after testing. If your goal is to have a testing project, a project that you can test and you can iterate, then you're gonna have to make those decisions. You can't come with a legacy code from 3 or 4 years ago that there's no clear separation of concerns, and we discussed all in these last days about the solid principles and how separate different concerns of your application. But if you don't have any of that in place, you're going to try to write a unit test and you don't even know where to start. If your activity has like the presenter and then has data layer, has parsing JSON, is also making an API call, then before you can start applying any kind of testing to it, you need to decide on the architecture. And those things are together. So this is a testing project. The way that we found to be easier to start with the testing part on the UI side of things is we're using Espresso. We're gonna talk about it a bit later. But the UI testing is the spec. We have different set of features and we have different enabled features that we have in the application. So we're gonna use Espresso and the UI testing to decide how these activities are gonna behave between them. And those tests are gonna be the same for all the different samples that you're gonna have in this project. It's honest and decent unit test coverage. I think we do talk a lot, or we heard a lot about the test coverage. My test coverage is 100%. My app is perfect. But maybe it's not. And what this project is trying to show is decent unit testing. If you're working with presenters, then you should test just presenters. It doesn't make sense that you only test the JSON parsing side of things, because that's just gonna solve one thing, but you need to get and start testing the things that are really important for your application. In this case, your business logic and how that interacts with the rest of the app. And then you have non-UI Android tests. Those are very important as well. Those are costly compared to having a unit test, but examples like content providers or loaders, when we're using the SQLite database underneath, you still need to go and test that the actual database does what you want them to do. You have to test that it's inserting, it's deleting, and it's updating. So even though it's harder to test, because you need a different setup. Those are also very important. So this project also sums up different ways of testing databases and interaction with it. It's a very the decision that we took about why should we make this a to-do app. It's the easiest example that we found. So this very first version of it is a very simple to-do app. As you can see, it's not amazing material design. It's not amazing animation. It's a very showcase of we can add lists, you can add tasks, you can check them for completed, and you can edit them. And there's a second screen that shows statistics about how many tasks have you completed, how many tasks you have active. It's just a very simple example of a app that we can have today. You can see it, yes. So today we have, so the project started with two examples. We have to do MVP, and we're going to discuss a little bit about that architecture. And right now we have stable samples. We have 7 of an MVP, an MVP version that is using loaders. Then there is a data binding example as well. We have an MVP clean that Jorge is the one that started. So this is a very good example of use cases and business logic. We have a Dagger example that is also based out of MVP that Saul wrote and that was mentioned earlier before. There's a content provider example that I wrote. Then that's because I do like I'm old school. I like content providers and loaders, so that's my problem. And then Rx Java is another example that's been stable, I think, in the last month. There's also another example of how to use Rx with MVP in the scale of this project. In development, we have a tablet version. So for now, we only have a simple phone app. Just can rotate landscape and that's it. We have in development a tablet version of it when we would have presenters trying to explore how to do MVP with tablets as well. And we have 2 external contributions, and then we'll talk about later how to contribute if you're interested in doing so. We have a fragmentless with no fragments, it's only views. And then we have a second example with Conductor. I think we finished that 2 days ago. There was an external contributor that finished it as well. So if you're interested in Conductor, you can also take a look and see how it is. As I said before, the UI testing as a contract is a decision that we made because no matter how many samples you have, no matter how many different ways of doing it, the UI side is always going to be the same. If you look at this simple test, this is deleting a task, then it's going to rotate the device, it's going to check that the title is the one that I'm expecting, the description, and then we're going to check that the delete button is displayed. This test is exactly the same if you're using RxJava, if you're using MVP, MVVM, Flux, or whatever other architecture you're using. So this is never going to change, and as long as this is never broken, you're going to make sure that your sample is going to work as expected. We have UI testing for almost, and I would say almost every single feature that the app has today, and that's very important for us because the only way that you know that everything was as expected is having these tests running and properly functioning. In terms of the architecture itself of the first version, again, this is a very opinionated example as well. This is the base for the MVP. You guys have the presentation layer has a fragment that's the one interacting as a view. We have a presenter inside the activity, and that will be the presentation layer, very basic. As Mira was saying before, this is our version of MVP. There's no just silver bullet, so this is this is our option to do it. And then in terms of the data side of things, we're using the repository pattern, and then we have 2 data sources. One is local, will be the cache. That can be SQLite, Realm, or whatever the solution you guys want to implement. And then we have the remote data source that is simulating the network calls to get them from a server. And then the repo is the one in charge of deciding whether you go to the remote or you go to the local one, and then you do the operations to save the state between them. There are 5 decisions that we had to make when we started this and when Jose started this back in the days. For now, we have 2 flavors. One is mock and one is prod. The main reason for it is for all the UI tests are run against the mock flavor, which means that we don't have to, we're gonna mock the repo so it doesn't go to the network call, so it doesn't have 2 or 3 seconds or as long as necessary to get the data. We're gonna use a mock version of the repo so we can just pass in all the data that we want. And that's, I think, how UI tests should be working. You shouldn't be testing that the network calls are done. If you're going to do an espresso test, just test that your screen is displaying what you want it to display. And those were the first decision. We're using fragments. I'm not going to ask if you do like fragments or not. That's a decision that you guys want to make. And it's just another way of doing it. Again, it's another design decision. There's an example as well to do it without fragments. But we went for it because we had the idea of building the tablet version as well, so it was going to be simpler to get that done. The network today is not a real network. The only thing we're doing is just simulating, I think it's a second and a half that the thread is sleeping for simulating the network call. So we just have a repo that waits for a second and a half and then brings back the data that we expect. And in terms of features, we just have two screens, a list of tasks that you can interact with, and then we have a you can delete it, you can create a new one, and then the second screen is a statistic, as I said before, where you can check which is active on or completed. And then the prod version is using the new shrinker, not Proga, but the new shrinker to strip out things that we don't need anymore. It's a platform for Android devs. Picture this as another step in terms of documentation. If you go today and starting on Android, you go to your training websites on developer.android.com, you're gonna see how to do a lot of things. And this is a living example of those practices taken a step further. So you wanna check how MVP works, you can do it from here. You wanna check clean architecture, you can also check it from here. And what we want to take from this project, and we expect that you all can take, is just a learning experience where you can compare different ways of doing the same thing, and you can make an educated guess of how to move forward. We would like to see people discussing about it. There are many voices in the community discussing MVP, and I am MVP, I am MVVM, I am doing something else, but nobody has to have has to be the one winning the discussion. This is just for everyone to empower them to make better decisions. And it can just be a base of a template. When I was started with Help Scout, I took the clean example as a template to start building the app. And doesn't mean you have to copy and paste the whole thing, but it's just the concepts that are important. And then again, if you're part of the discussion, a project that now has 10,900 stars, I was saying before, is not something that nobody is looking at. So we're very happy that that's what's happening. And yes, it is a project, but it's always easier to compare things if you know how to use the project itself. This is just a few ideas of how to use the project and how you guys can take the most out of it when you're looking at it. The first thing is learning, and it's simply just browse the code. I think Jorge was saying that yesterday. The truth is in the code. This is an open platform, and just simply use GitHub or clone the repo and start browsing through the code and see how things are done in this way. And you can make an educated decision towards you like it or not. GitHub now it was very well in terms of navigating and checking the source, so you can do that there. You can afterwards compare locally and just using your favorite diff tool. If you want to compare how do you guys do this, if it's MVP or is MVP clean or with Dagger, in a very simple command line interface, you can simply check how things are done. I think the example we want to see here is comparing MVP and MVP clean. When Jose is a Linux user, so he uses Melt as a diff tool. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see that properly, but yes, you have. This is how you create the presenter. The left side of things, the left hand has the MVP clean implementation, and the right one is using the MVP implementation. So you can see what are the difference between presenters in both sources. So you have the MVP clean. You will have this a use case scheduler, and you have a fragment over there, and then the other one has what we have, fragment manager and something else. So this is very easy to check how both implementations work, and you can compare them. And then of course, every single sample is showing a proper graph with the architecture and the decisions made to make it work. again, in the left side of things, you have the MVP version, and the right side, you have the MVP clean, where there's a new module, which in case is the business logic with the business layer with use cases and then the business logic as well. In terms of outreach, I'm not sure. We would like people to write about it. I'm not sure if that's a good example or not because I don't even know what he's saying. I'm hoping he's saying it's a great example and he loves it, but we don't really know. If somebody knows Chinese or Japanese, we'll be happy to let us know what does that mean. But yes, we've already seen examples from the community that are discussing how they've used blueprints, they've recommended blueprints to the Learn, and that's very interesting as well. So yes, if you're interested and you're part of it, it would be great if you can talk about it. And to me, the most important one is using it as a base. So whether you're starting a new project or you are maybe creating new features for something you've already built before, it is very interesting if you guys can take this and make a decision whether I think I'm gonna go through MVP for this part or I think I'm gonna do MVVM, and it simply is a base as opposed to having a template. I think we all complain about when we see example from Google when you see, oh, this is how you use, I don't know, smart look for passwords, and we all see like a massive activity class with everything in the same method, and people complain, oh, this is not clean, or this is not a very well way of doing it. We want that to be a proper way for you guys to check how to do things in this case for the to-do app. And one important part of the project is also to share a bit of the findings that we discover while developing it. For what we have for now, there's no difference between APK sizes or method counts comparing all of them, which was quite surprising. I thought it was going to be more different for different samples, but there's literally no difference, almost no difference between sizes and method counts. This is the dex count for when Minify is disabled. The blue bar are all the external dependencies, and the red bar is the actual code for the app. You see to the MVP is 403 methods, clean is 550, Dagger is 613, and then content providers is 419. So they're very, very similar. But then you see dependencies, you would see like data binding has a bigger amount of methods for all the dependencies as the data binding is bringing with the library and the dependencies. But again, it's not that much of a difference. If this was a monolith application with 25 screens and 200 different features, then I'm sure the difference would be bigger. But it's interesting to see that there's not much difference in the beginning. With Minify enabled, we go down a little bit more, and yeah, they're not example a huge number of method counts for both. In terms of APK size, almost very similar as well. Data binding continues being the biggest one, but the rest are almost the same size for the APK. And I'm sorry you can't read it properly, but there's a wiki in the repo that you can check and you'll see like a better comparison. This is a table that we want to kind of showcase what are the differences between all the samples that we have in the project today. And also the interesting for me is the testability and the complexity or learning cost, where the way to make a decision whether this is the one I want to go for or not, it's looking at this table is going to give you a better idea of what are the options. And yeah, using, for example, RxJava has a very high testability, but it also has a very high learning cost. So it's up to you guys to decide whether you want your team to be married with this framework or not. And that's how you more or less compare all the different samples. So as long as we keep adding new samples, we keep adding as well different all the different features for each one of them, and you can always come to this table and compare which way we should go. And this is a cry for help. This is not a project for just 5 people and trying to do something. This is a community effort, and we would love you guys to be involved. It's very nice when people is adding new issues in the repo and somebody else just replies saying, oh, I would do this way, or somebody's asking what if we have a repository with 3 different data sources? How do we go about it? And then somebody else would jump in and just give their opinion. We want it to be like a healthy discussion, and so for that we need everybody involved, and that would be great. If you're even interested in creating your own samples, there's 2 ones like this conductor and also the fragmentless just came from somebody said, hey, I want to do this, I want to play with it, and I want to contribute it back. So also something you guys can do to get involved. And after a while, there are some core maintainers that you can do the whole merge into master. So people who get involved with that, you could be a core maintainer as well if that's of interest to you. And this is an example of how to add a sample. This is the conductor that we were discussing before. And Greg Pierce just say, hey, I've done this. I want to play with conductor, and I thought that your project would be a good idea. And that's he did. He opened an issue. Everything was discussed. And then I think Jorge was reviewing the implementation, or somebody else was reviewing it. And it's like honest feedback. And yeah, this is a very great way to get involved and add a new sample. And this is just the beginning, as they say. V2 is coming, and we would love to have more underlying patterns. We only have MVP and data binding as the two big ones. We would like to have MVVM and MVC. I think Florina is working on MVVM, but yeah, we have Flux and Redux, and we have MVC. So we'd love to see that and comparing. It's interesting to have other apps. Again, the To-Do app is a very simple example. So we would love to start adding more different platforms, different variations of the application, maybe a chat, maybe something else. Always open to discussion as well if you guys are interested in one in particular. And we would like to find a better way to have the discussion. So we think we started with Gitter for a while to do as a chat room to discuss about it. It didn't quite work. So we love to have a better platform to discuss whatever findings or whatever thing comes to you guys, to your head. And yeah, we don't have continuous integration yet, and that's something we'd like to do. We've been playing with Travis, and it was a bit slower for what we're trying to do. So we're gonna discuss whether Circle CI or some other solution to get all that. So whenever somebody does the pull request, we show that the tests are working. I don't have to go there, get the repo, and then run the test locally as well. And that's it. It's a very open questions for anybody who would like to know more. And yeah, you can reach us both on Twitter to Jose and myself. And if not, just go to the repo and open the discussion. And that's it. So thank you guys.